Hey guys, I'm back with another Batmobile, and this time we're going to be taking a look at the Eaglemoss model of the Batmobile from Batman Black and White number 3. This is a really cool model, and while it comes from a more recent Batman book, the look of this Batmobile has a very retro design for a very specific reason. The first series of black and white Batman books came out back in 1996. It was a great idea, and the books were obviously a huge success for DC. It was initially 4 issues of Batman, and within each issue you had 4 or 5 mini-stories, each basically highlighted a different artist or writer from DC. So you end up with this great catalog of Batman short stories from some of the most talented artists and storytellers in DC. Names like Jim Lee, Ted McKeever, Bruce Timm, Paul Dini, Alex Ross, and Brian Boland, just to name a very small few. There was also a series of backup black and white stories in Batman Gotham Knights, so you got even more of these stories. I like the black and white approach. I think it's perfect for Batman because, particularly with the first 4 issues, they really played up that noir detective aspect of the character. It was also visually great for emphasizing the darkness and the shadow of Batman's world. Now, there was a second series of Batman black and white books that came out back in 2013-2014, and that's where this model of the Batmobile comes from. It's from a story in issue number 3 called Namtab, Babel Comes to Gotham, and it was written and illustrated by graphic designer Rian Hughes, and I love the style of his artwork. It really reminds me of this sort of Tartakovsky style. I was a big fan of Samurai Jack, and if you're familiar with that cartoon, that's what this art style makes me think of. It's a crazy but fun story that uses the world of the Silver Age Batman to make a statement. It's very reminiscent of the Batman storytelling from the late 50s and the early 60s. For instance, Batman and Robin, they're dealing with this alien invasion, and they use this observatory to shine the bat symbol on the moon in order to call their old alien friend Taldar. Now, Taldar is an interplanetary space cop who worked with Batman and Robin during the very colorful Silver Age of comics. He was first seen in Detective Comics number 282 back in 1960, back when Batman and Robin were fighting creatures of the deep and flying through space with jetpacks. Again, the book uses characters and the setting of the Silver Age in order to make a fun little statement. It's meant to be this witty commentary on post-modernism, and while it's a little pedantic at times, which might be part of the irony in the story, you can really tell that Rian Hughes has a deep love for the character, and he seems to be very knowledgeable about the history of Batman. Now, what I think is hilarious about the magazine that Eaglemoss has given us is that the special features for this Batmobile are almost this addition to the ironic, humorous kind of commentary that we find in the story. Aside from some of the classic retro features in this Batmobile, like the electronic HUD and the crime lab, this Batmobile also has special features like a trouser press to ensure Batman always looks his best if called upon to address the public. And it also comes with a loudspeaker to, quote, deliver Batman's message of justice to villains. It's really cool the way they did that in the magazine, just to sort of tie everything together. And then the cross sections show off some of those features. They also give us a nice digital rendering of the interior of the Batmobile. There's also a look into that crime lab that they have in the trunk. And again, you never really know where Eaglemoss gets their info for the magazines, since oftentimes these features aren't even mentioned in the books. But I love how creative they were with the magazine for this particular issue. Eaglemoss did a nice job with the diorama too. The combination of the base and the 3D lenticular is basically a condensed version of the cover page for the story. They basically took like the warped stop sign from the bottom of the page there, and they moved it up. Over here you have the sign that says Gotham Observatory, 5 miles. And in the background you have the Gotham City skyline and the bat signal being projected onto the moon. The center has that big image of Taldar in his spaceship, and I love how the front of his flying saucer has an image of his head, almost like the battering ram on the front of the Batmobile. The base has an image of the street that Batman and Robin are both driving down. And the front of the print has that same shadow of grass that we find at the very bottom of that page in the book. And when you put it all together, the Batmobile looks great in front of the diorama. Now, I know that the original image has the Batmobile driving in the other direction, but virtually all of the models in this line are facing in this direction, so that doesn't really bother me. And, you know, the backdrop, it really captures the art and the story in the book. So, let's take a closer look at this model in the Batcave. I just love the flat, sleek design of this Batmobile. It's very cool. And the model itself, from the pointy fender in the front to the trunk in the back, is one solid piece of die-cast metal. You have a few plastic accents like the fenders in the back and all of the detail in the cabin there. But even like this cowl, this battering ram, is part of the die-cast metal sculpt. Let me give you a closer look at it here. And the white headlights on the front, those are separate plastic pieces. Then you have the tiny little bat symbols on the hubcaps there. And of course the wheels are rubber. There's not much to look at on the bottom there. I'm not really sure what that red dot on the back is for, but you can see the exhaust pipes, they extend out from underneath the body there, and that all leads to the back of the model. The mold of the body has nice touches to it, like the silver line on the front and the sculpted door handles. And this is one of those models where Eaglemoss has included all of the detail in the cabin. They obviously don't do it with every release, but they did a fantastic job with this Batmobile. It's got the steering wheel, the gear shift, the detail on the dashboard, and you can see it even has the foot pedals. And I like the sculpting on the twin seats. It really fits in with that wide retro design. I also like how the windshield has these points on the side that almost imply the ears on Batman's cowl. They just did a really good job of recreating this Batmobile. You know, it's another one of those designs that I think they had to normalize a little bit. Because of the nature of the stylized artwork, the dimensions of the Batmobile are not always consistent from one panel to the next. But, you know, they still ended up giving us a model that is really faithful to that wacky sort of cartoon-like design that we see in the book. I want to do a couple of quick side-by-side comparisons with two other Batmobiles that come from the Silver Age. The first is the Batmobile from Detective Comics number 371, which came out back in 1968. Now, this is obviously one of the blue Batmobiles, right? And I know that these two don't really have a lot in common visually, but I wanted to show you how comic book creators were actually thinking back then. And I think the Batmobile that Rian Hughes came up with for this black and white story, it really fits in with that sort of dated creative mentality for comic books back in the day. Now, this black Batmobile that was revealed in Detective Comics number 362, a year earlier, back in 1967, has a little bit more of a connection with this black and white Batmobile. It's a bit more blocky, right? The design is more of a square, but they both have that flat design. They both also have very sharp lines and points in the fins as well as other parts of the body. And they both have a few of those predictable 1950s, 1960s idea of what a futuristic car should actually look like. And looking at them all together, they're all unique, right? But I think you can see how all three could fit into the Silver Age of comic books. In closing, this is one of the better constructed Batmobiles in this Eaglemoss line. I think it's great. I'm sure it's one of several that sit in my collection, and I think it's pretty cool when I first get it. Then when I take it down, I take a closer look at the model outside of the diorama, and then I start digging deeper into the book that it comes from. Man, I know I sound like a broken record in some of my videos, but I just love discovering new Batman books that I probably wouldn't have read otherwise. The black and white story that this particular Batmobile comes from is not one of my favorites, but this Batmobile was basically my gateway introduction to the Batman black and white books. Many of them are just amazing. Again, I love that detective noir quality about the Dark Knight, and many of these Batman stories focus on that part of his character. I'm sure many of you have already read these short stories, but if you haven't, I'd highly recommend checking them out. As always, I want to take a moment to thank all of my old and new subscribers for your support and for taking the time to always leave great comments, guys. I really appreciate it. Of course, I also want to give special thanks to Stewart Murray, one of my best friends who has always helped me get a hold of some great Batmobiles, just like this one. So, we've been looking at the Eaglemoss Batman Automobilia issue number 76, the Batmobile from Batman Black and White number 3. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you on the next one. Take care.